So, like, was anyone gonna tell me that there had been a planned Banjo-Kazooie remake? No? Okay. Welcome to Non-Playable Content, a video series I have been planning for some time now. In this series, we will be going over canceled games and games that, weirdly enough, became other games. In our first ever episode of NPC, we will be going over the elusive and mysterious Banjo X, a short-lived concept that existed prior to other things. From the Hailfire Peaks to the Glitter Gulch depths, I have scoured the virtual globe for every shred of information I can feasibly get my claws on, to not only determine what Banjo X really was, but also get an in-depth full picture as to why it was scrapped. Our story begins in 1998 with the release of Banjo-Kazooie, a new IP belonging to Rareware that ended up becoming the 10th most sold Nintendo 64 title. Rare, having worked closely with Nintendo for quite some time, was in what a lot of people would probably consider to be their heyday, coming out with absolute bangers left and right. The Baron Bird game really being no exception. With Banjo's inclusion in Diddy Kong Racing, he was somewhat well known in most households in the late 90s, and the success of his first duo game with Kazooie saw the IP spring up a sequel almost immediately. However, while prospects seemed good for the Baron Bird, a storm was quietly brewing ahead of them. A storm called the Microsoft Buyout. Now, there's a lot we can talk about when it comes to the buyout because it's an event that's coated in layers upon layers of misinformation and rumors. While in the first draft of this video, I did write an entire segment dedicated to it, I looked at it a bit later and went, wow, this is kind of distracting from the point of the video. So, in standard Amalia fashion, I cut that part out and I slapped it into another Word document for a future video, so get excited for that, I guess. All you really need to know for this video is that Rare used to work exclusively for Nintendo making second-party games. Then they didn't, and were bought out by Microsoft. Nintendo kept IPs such as Donkey Kong and Star Fox, since those were first-party IPs to begin with. Rare took with them IPs such as Perfect Dark, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and Banjo-Kazooie. September 24th, 2002, the day the buyout was announced, remains perhaps one of the darkest days in gaming history. Unless you just really like Sea of Thieves, I guess. I'm sorry for being dramatic about this, by the way, it will happen again. I just sometimes think about all those beloved IPs sitting there collecting dust, and then my eye starts twitching, and I get really sad. But hey, I hear Microsoft is super business savvy, and this decision to leave a bunch of nostalgic IPs buried in the ground was probably some super genius business move or something. I don't know, I'm just a dragon on the internet. Anyways, after the buyout, Rare was in Microsoft's hands. After the release of their first Xbox title, grabbed by the Ghoulies, the studio was thinking about how to bring Banjo to the Xbox 360 console. Their first solution was, wait for it, a remake of the original game. Now I know what you're thinking. A remake? Why would Rare choose to remake Banjo-Kazooie? Well, I don't really have a super firm answer on that, but if I could make an educated guess, I would imagine that it would be to familiarize Xbox players with the franchise. Banjo-Kazooie had not really seen a new game on more modern hardware other than the handheld games Grunty's Revenge and Banjo Pilot. And I mean, they did kind of give Conker's Bad Fur Day the same treatment by making Live and Reloaded. But as it turns out, the Banjo remake had a bit of a different spin on it that players probably wouldn't see coming. In more recent gaming history, there has been an ongoing debate about what a remake should be. Should it be a one-to-one to the original, but with quality of life improvements and updated graphics? Or should the remake tell the same story and hit the same basic beats, while expanding upon the original concept with new ideas incorporated in order to enhance the player's experience? I'll be totally honest, I really don't have a firm answer on that. The Banjo-Kazooie remake would have been more towards the second idea of a remake. Not a one-to-one remake, but giving that impression initially, but as the player progressed, they would realize that the characters themselves were self-aware that the events of the first game had already played out before. This would lead to some of the characters behaving differently. Apparently, some of the puzzles around the levels were also set to be updated in various ways, though the how part of that remains a secret, at least as far as I could tell from my research. Greg Males, who worked as the creative director for Rare for many years, had a bit to say about this idea in an interview with Rare Gamer back in May 2008. In this interview, he said, "The plan was to pretend it was a carbon copy remake, but then stuff changed. In Mumbo's Mountain, a giant queen termite was going to break out of the top of the termite hill, and you had to get Conga to lob his oranges at her. That kind of stuff. Clever, but a bit last gen, so we dumped that." This concept had the working title of Banjo X, which kinda sounds like Banjo's name after dark if you catch my meaning. Now, some things were actually designed and developed for Banjo X. In a 2004 dev kit that was discovered in late 2011, several strings of code were discovered relating to a list of items. This list included the following: springy shoes, rocket sneakers, metal feathers, aviator goggles, invisibility chocolates, big feathers, bag of eggs, and a diamond beak. There was also a very bare bones, literally, 3D model of Mumbo Jumbo. But other than that, there really wasn't much else found in this dev kit. Attempting to launch the game would see this screen pop up and nothing would really happen. The game wasn't anywhere near playable. In 2015, former Rare devs Steve Males and Ed Bryan would make some tweets about Banjo X, showing off some more models that had been made for it. Ed Bryan's tweets unfortunately don't seem to exist any longer, nor does his account, and given the hellscape that Twitter is, who can really blame him? Steve's tweets do still seem to exist, but the pictures don't seem to be there anymore. Other game development preservation enthusiasts have thankfully saved these prototype images that you'll probably be seeing right now on the screen. In a 2020 interview with Canadian Guy A, Steve Males talked a bit more about Banjo X and mentioned something unique that they had proposed for this idea. They proposed having the Baron Bird duo explore destroyed versions of the worlds from the first game. Interestingly enough, this lines up somewhat with what we see of Grunty's lair in Banjo-Tooie. Cheeto is located in front of where the entrance to Mumbo's Mountain would be, but the way is blocked by a cave-in, presumably caused by the final fight in the first game. While previously in this video, I did say that I didn't really have a firm answer on which type of remake is the better type. I do have to say though that this idea of playing with player expectations can really make for a unique experience. Having the characters be self-aware that they were in a remake would have made for a vibe that I think would have been really fitting for the fourth wall smashing humor of the Banjo-Kazooie series. I'm a bit sad that this never really came to fruition. And if I can be so for real right now, I was kind of waiting for that to happen with Yuka Replayly. Is that a spoiler? I don't know if that's a spoiler. Is it a spoiler that the remake master version of the game is a remake master version of the game and only a remake master version of the game? I don't know. I'm sure I'll get flamed for it in the comments though at some point. Funnily enough, if you look back at Conker Live and Reloaded, this idea for a remake playing with players' expectations was teased at the very beginning of the game. There is a gargoyle character that in the original N64 version of the game falls off a bridge after Conker bonks him with a frying pan. And in the remade version of the game, he doesn't fall off the bridge and instead comments that the game designer thought it would be wise to change the training level a bit to fool the audience into thinking that the rest of the game would also be different. He instead gets whacked with a baseball bat, then crushed to death by a boulder, which is kind of more brutal, honestly.
Hey, Mr. Designer, no more surprises, please.
So, all of that being said, why did Rare decide to not go through with this? Well, according to the interviews in Rare Revealed, the making of Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, the devs just didn't think it would sell well and feared that it wouldn't really appeal to players. And to their credit, I totally see where they're coming from. Banjo-Kazooie was first released in 1998, and releasing a remake of a game within that decade, or even for its 10th anniversary, would be something that I don't think a lot of fans would have gotten behind. Even if it was, in a sense, a remake and a pseudo-sequel to the game, the devs needed to freshen up the game enough to appeal to players wanting something new. Additionally, according to a Nintendo Life interview with composer Grant Kirkhope, they were already spending quite a bit of time retexturing everything from the first game to modernize it. As he said in that interview, "I didn't like it really. I didn't think it's what we should have done. Tim Stamper's idea was to remake the original game as a co-op and to remodel it all. A lot of senior guys on the team, me included, thought that that was a bad idea, so we sort of moaned about it quite a lot. And it went ahead a little bit, and we said in all the time it would take to retexture all these levels and make it look great, we might as well just do a newer game." Prior to reading this article, I had never heard about a rendition of Banjo-Kazooie as a co-op game. So I thought that tidbit was pretty interesting, and I decided to dig into it a bit further. It did take a bit of digging, but I was able to find at least a concept for this. According to Steve Mails, apparently this 4-player mode would have featured 4 banjos being controlled either via online or local co-op. You could help each other by stacking the banjos on top of each other, or just perform various tasks as 4 players each with their own banjo. Think of Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures, but Banjo-Kazooie. It seems like this idea was scrapped pretty early on, as Banjo X allegedly had at one point a skeleton crew of maybe 2 people working on it. The rest of the team was temporarily moved to Viva Pinata. During Banjo X's development, an adjacent co-op mode was brought to the table. During my research, I found former devs referencing that this adjacent idea was proposed at some point alongside the 4 Banjo multiplayer mode, while others talked about it in a more single-player way. Banjo-Kazooie is a franchise full of quirky characters galore, but there is hardly anyone as iconic as the mean green herself, Gruntilda Winky Bunyan. Gruntilda is a pretty fierce villain. She's shamelessly gross and extremely brutal. She's arguably one of the highlights of the series, her commentary like a disgusting poetic soup of insults that simultaneously makes your jaw drop in outrage and also makes you laugh. Although often in the backdrops of the Baron Bird games until the final boss, she has a sort of presence about her that makes her feel very much in your face constantly. Especially if you game over in Banjo-Kazooie and watch her turn sweet little Tootie into a terrifying abomination. As the devs worked on the Banjo X concept, they thought to utilize the witch a bit more. And I think this concept that they had with Grunty would have been a very unique addition to the game they had in mind. In this concept, Grunty and Banjo would have been competing in each level. While Banjo and Kazooie would be running around collecting notes and jiggies, Grunty would have been doing the same thing. She would have been in each level, messing with the protagonist's progress to keep them from scoring a victory against her again. And what a game that would have been. Frantic and chaotic, and probably full of the players screaming as they tried to speedrun ahead of the witch. In another world, we absolutely had speedrunners playing this game, and we absolutely had GameFAQ threads of people making metas about what route was optimal to beat Grunty. I can basically picture it, and it brings a little tear to my eye. But as nice as that would have been, there's a pretty obvious, glaring issue with this concept. Gruntilda would have had to be controlled by an AI, and in the early 2000s, technology just really wasn't there yet. Not in the level it needed to be to see this concept through in a clean and precise way. It would have been an absolute nightmare to implement, and implement well. And so, unfortunately, the idea was scrapped. In addition to this, the market of gaming was shifting. What was hot for the Nintendo 64 era wasn't really what was flying off the shelves in the early 2000s. As Kirk Hope put it, I really said we should make Banjo 3E. That's what people want to see. But at the time, it looked like platform games weren't. It was the year when platformers weren't as popular. People wanted shooters and all that kind of stuff. And so we all thought it wouldn't sell, and people wouldn't want to play a game like that. In that 2020 interview with Canadian Guy A, Steve Mails actually corroborated this and said that Rare felt a pressure to make a game that was more in line with the Xbox crowd. He also mentioned that if they were still working for Nintendo, then they probably would have done a Banjo 3E that was more in line with the first two games. During the development of Banjo X, Rare had purchased the Havoc engine, and there was a desire from the team to try something new with the series, instead of just producing what they felt would be a repetitive experience. Which led them to do something a little nutty. Now, this is the part of the script where usually the YouTuber on screen starts bashing Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts. But I'm gonna be honest, I've never played nuts and bolts. And really, I haven't seen too much of the game either because I do want to play it in the future, so yeah, there's not really a nuts and bolts bashing section of the video. I'm sorry if you're disappointed by that. I think? I hear the game bashes itself a lot though, for what it's worth, so there is that. But I wouldn't really know, I've never even owned an Xbox 360. Moving on. Unfortunately, this does mark the end of what we know of Banjo X as a concept. Rare did go on to explore new concepts, which led to the development of Nuts and Bolts, which released in 2008. The original Banjo-Kazooie, with some quality of life features, was ported by 4J Studios onto Xbox Live Arcade, with Banjo-Tooie following the next year. As of 2025, that is the last we have heard of the Bear and Bird duo, aside from Smash Bros. Ultimate. A lot of the staff who worked on the series moved on to other projects or just moved on entirely. Nuts and Bolts remains the final title chronologically in the series, with a reputation of being a commercial flop and, to many fans, a stain on the series' legacy. Despite it having a lot of really innovative ideas, like, really, look at this vehicle builder. This feels really ahead of its time, honestly. I cannot help but think that if this game had not been attached to the Banjo-Kazooie IP, or if it had just been labeled as a spin-off, then it would have been better received. But I don't know, I haven't played it yet, and when I do get the chance to play it, I will be sure to tell you guys when you can watch that, and definitely my thoughts. With regards to Banjo X, funnily enough, while I think that Rare was right to not remake Banjo-Kazooie at that time, I cannot help but wonder if these Banjo X ideas would have been an overall better received product than what we did get. We will never really know the answer to that, but I'd like to think that it would have been better received. Even if a remake felt too soon, I think that a too soon remake would have been a safer gamble than experimenting with a totally different genre for the franchise. However, I am saying that as a consumer, not a dev, and with the benefit of almost 20 years of hindsight. This is probably the coldest take in the entire universe, but I think that Grant was right and that they should have just made Banjo 3E. That probably would have just been the best decision to make at that point, instead of a game that was such a genre deviation like Nuts and Bolts, or even just a remake that felt too soon. But that being said, having researched everything, having listened to interviews and read interviews, I can understand how things ended up the way that they did. And regardless of how you feel about how the game turned out, I think that it's important to understand that These decisions happened because the developers wanted to give fans a good game to enjoy that they believed would survive the market at the time. And you know what? As a fan, I can appreciate that notion a lot, even if I probably will forever lament what could have been. Before I end today's video, I want to give a special thank you to several individuals who contributed to the creation of this episode. Big shout out to Pierre Kong for helping me with the research side of this episode. When I got stuck and couldn't find a source for something, he was able to fix my problem in like a couple of hours, which led me to discovering even more, and the script got a bit bigger. I also want to give a shout out to Daniel Alba for coming up with the name Non-Playable Content for this video series when I realized that my original name idea wasn't gonna work out. And a big shout out to all of the YouTube friends that I've made over the last year who have been super supportive of my endeavors on this red site and have continued to show me the ropes. And a big shout out to all of my VTuber friends who listen to me scream about bears, birds, monkeys, and space foxes, and they don't really know what I'm talking about, but they listen to me scream about them anyways. I appreciate you guys as well. One of these days, I will play Nuts and Bolts and give it the good ol' Amalia Solaris review. Or retrospective. Or whatever we wanna call that. Do we get to call it a retrospective if it's less than 20 years old? What even is retro? I got a whole video I'm working on about that. All of this to say, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Take care!